This conference will now be recorded.
I'll call to order the board of the library board of trustees meeting for Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. It's 12 noon. We're in the Davenport Public Library main building, meeting room C. I would like to welcome the board members and staff who are here, Honey, Joe, Michael, Shelley, Malvika, myself, Steve Emming is here, ex officio, former president. And then we have Jeff Collins, the director, Lexi Riley, the assistant director, Jennifer, the HR operations manager, Casey, office manager, Tracy, development officer, and then Marion, our third council liaison, is here. And I see Hillary is here attending via Zoom, and Amanda is on Zoom too. We also have Jason Orr here, who is going to talk to us at the end of the meeting. So I welcome all. So first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do we have a motion in a second to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay. There's a second? Okay. Motion in a second. Honey?
Aye, yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Malvika?
Yes.
And my own vote is yes. Okay, so that passes. Now we have public comment. I don't see anyone. So we'll move on to reports and communication. Friends. Do you have something, Hillary?
I just wanted to let everyone know that we have set a date for our fundraising event, which will be Saturday, September 27th. So mark your calendars. We will have more information soon. Tessa, the marketing coordinator, is helping us put materials together. So we're excited and we'll be ready to share more information soon. And that's all I have today.
Okay, thank you. Committee reports, finance? Joe?
Not a lot to report. Looks like we're on track for everything. I didn't see anything that jumped out at me. But as I told you, I didn't get a real good chance to look at it hard.
Well, it's a pretty short report this month. Personnel, Amanda?
Nothing to report from personnel.
Okay, thank you. Advocacy, Malvika.
Oh, just wanted to share with you all, I went for my first on-site board training and did it with CSD. It was really interesting. I have a few points written down. I plan to write down a report kind of a thing, so just to share it with you all, or just keep it with us in the future. Maybe present at ILA, all of us could do something like that.
Which department was it?
Oh, it was Customer Services Department,
Okay.
CSD, and I worked with Steph at Fairmont. I was there for 2 hours. It was really interesting. Got to know a lot more to what she already shares with us when she comes in, talks to all of us. So that was one. Second, not as a board member, but as a volunteer at the Big Art Museum, I want to thank Catherine and her staff for helping us get photos for the Davenport Arts Museum, because we will be celebrating, its 20th year and 100 years of Davenport Art Museum. So, they're doing a lot with helping. So that was that. Another thing that I absolutely enjoyed, what our library is doing, is February is Library Lovers Month. And at Eastern, I went on to return a few of my books, and while I put those books to the slot, right at the entrance, there was a lovely little poster and some sticky notes there saying, what did you like about this book? Maybe write it as a word or a sentence or whatever. The thing that I enjoyed is not just a sticky note, but creating a dialogue between the user and the library. And what they were going to do, because Tim and I went in and I said, hey, this is lovely, like what you've done, like, pink sticky notes and all that. And they said they're going to put it out or something, some out in the sense, maybe some kind of an arrangement or whatever on the walls, or some design, So that was lovely. So thank you to everyone who were thinking of doing all that. So that was that. I just wanted to, Tom and all of us here wanted to share National Library Week is coming up, which is in the month of April 9 to the 12th is National Library Week. And just a thought to share that we do the donuts to the library staff,
yes.
to the National Library Workers' Day, which I believe is, and I'll again recheck myself, I think it's April 9th or 10th. I'll recheck and share the dates again. So just a thought that I thought I should share it with you all. And twice, Steve, you would remember, 2019 and 2023, we did the National Library Proclamation along with the city of Davenport. If we want to do something like that
Certainly.
again, just a thought to share.
Typically, the city council is very, very willing to do those
Right,
kinds of things.
Right, so if we could, with the help of dear Marion, thank you, do something like that, that was that. And just a lovely thought again that I was going through one of our blogs, the Info Cafe blog, which is I think the reference librarians have the blog. And the book that we have right now is The Librarian Fighting Against Book Banning in America. And I thought of what Honey had recommended to having a book reading club amongst ourselves. This is an absolutely lovely book to see, and we have it today on our blog. It talks about that book. So that was that for now.
What's the name of the book?
The Librarian, The Fight Against Book Banning in America, and it is written by Amanda Jones. I think she was a school librarian herself, if I'm not mistaken. And it is on today's Info Cafe blog of the library. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
One question. Was it last year that the trustees kind of chipped in some money for those donuts?
Yes,
Is that-
please.
Okay,
Yes.
So we'll do that again this year?
Yes, I think this is our seventh year that we've been doing donuts for them. So normally I after Tom introduces that in one of our meetings, then Casey helps me with the number of staff that are there at each library. And then, yes, you're correct, Michael. We kind
You
of chip
take
in.
care of that in March, probably?
Yes, but I mean, we can, maybe later, that's
All
okay.
right. Well, I have to budget.
You know, right. Casey will help, Casey helps me with the number and then we divide it and then that's all. So, but thank you for asking me that.
And typically, the board buys the donuts for the staff on that day, so.
Can I just
Yes, ma'am.
add that Malvika and Honey have advocacy committee meets.
Yes, thank you so
I
much.
just wanted to add that it was
Please.
really helpful for me as a new person on the committee. I learned a lot. I know the training Jeff did helped a lot too, but that was like getting down to more nitty gritty things and I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I missed that. So yes, the three of us did have a meeting, so thank you.
It was helpful.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Malvika.
And also, as long as we're talking about advocacy and Malvika mentioned the board enrichment training. And
Yeah.
I did that also with the technical services group.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very interesting about acquisition and cataloging of books and repairing books and polishing CDs and all kinds of stuff and things on the shelf with missing pieces that they're looking for.
Right.
And, really nice group of folks that like their jobs. It's very, very interesting. Also wanted to mention that I attended the lobby day on the 4th of February. And I spoke with my Senator, Kerry Brunhagen, and he was open to everything, didn't push back on anything when we were talking about the library levy. And I expressed to him hope that they might be able to reinstate that, even if it had to have like a 10-year renewal period. And he listened. He didn't say, yeah, we can do that or push back on it at all. Then my representative, Dan Gosa, was with the rest of the representatives in Mount Pleasant for Representative Graber's funeral. And so I wasn't able to talk with him, but I did follow up with him with an email and with my list of library legislation. Anyway, encourage everybody to do that. You might, I know you got an email probably, from Jeff about some of the legislation. There also been some emails from the Iowa Library Association. Really encourage everybody to contact your elected officials on those things, because can't hurt. We've got some serious stuff out there. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So, next item on the agenda, Director's Report. Jeff?
Thanks, Tom. So included in your packet is a report. I want to take a few moments to at least expand a bit on some of the items. The first thing that you'll note in the upper right is what I call the stat of the month. Right now, I think we're doing a really good job of providing information to you qualitatively in terms of library stories. One thing that I haven't done a whole lot of is the quantitative aspect of things. So what I'd like to do is, when it makes sense, add in something that would draw attention and perhaps have a conversation about a particular statistic that we're doing. And the one that I selected for this month, with the help of Lexi running some numbers through a financial calculator that we've got access to online, is what we're referring to as the total value of library use, which is $9.7 million. And that's based on an annual fiscal year 2024 numbers, and our budget there was only $6 million. So our return on investment really is about $1.60 for every dollar that is invested. So you can see a really good return on investment in terms of supporting libraries in the community. Questions or comments on that particular number?
I guess the question I would have is, I guess, speaking as the accountant did me, is how did you come up with the value of library use? Was this a statistic that exists out in the world and you just applied it to us?
Yep, yeah, good question. So there are a couple of organizations that have created a calculator online that you can utilize. And what it essentially does, the one that we used was ilovelibraries.org, and it's their library value calculator. And what we're able to do is put in the number of items circulated for a particular type format, for example, in the category, and then it'll give you, based on an average cost of that particular item, how much that value is to the community. So we're able to do that for a lot of the metrics that we utilize here in terms of kind of materials in circulation. So there's a different value for audiobooks versus an adult hardcover book. And we can get those numbers based on our circulation statistics from the prior year. It also does include some other value too, like program attendance, based on an average cost if you were to pay to attend a similar program elsewhere. It doesn't capture everything. For example, it doesn't include notary public services, I believe, a couple of things like that. So that number really is actually even higher. And again, that also is an average. So it's not going to be an exact number. We would have to figure out exactly how much we're spending on each individual item in comparison.
Okay, good. Thank you for the explanation.
A couple of other things. The FY 2026 budget workshops took place in early February. That budget, again, our fiscal year goes from July 1st to June 30th. So we're talking about the upcoming budget. We've been working on this since September of last year. At this point, for the library, everything is status quo. There's an overall increase of 1.9%, and that primarily reflects the negotiated employee salary and benefit increases that we'll talk about in a minute. The budget process still is ongoing. There's a deadline for approval set for April 23rd, and we have to, by statute, have the city has to have a budget approved by April 30th. So things at this point for next year look good for the library, which is positive. Related to that is the FY 2026 to 31 Capital Improvement Program, or the CIP. Again, that is program projects that generally for the city cost at least $50,000 and have a 5-year life expectancy. For us, the library materials program and the library electronic replacement program both reflected the increases that we had sought for in the prior years. So that's still in there. So that's $465,000 for purchasing library materials and $130,000 for all of our IT stuff. So that's really, really positive that those are still in there at that higher increased rate over what it was just a couple of years ago. There are currently 5 active CIP projects in our current fiscal year. The first has been completed. That's the audiovisual upgrades to the meeting rooms at Fairmount. I mentioned that also elsewhere in the budget or in my director's report. The second is replacing the glycol solution in one of the heat pumps at Eastern. The third is converting the cooling system from water to a glycol solution here at Maine. The fourth is the design work to replace the roof at Fairmount. That's just the design work this year, with the roof being replaced next year. And then the main library renovation phase 2 project, which we'll talk about again in just a minute. So next year does mark a milestone for Fairmount. It is celebrating its 20th anniversary, and it is going to receive a lot of enhancements. I call it the year of Fairmount because we're going to get a new roof, a new paint job in the inside, new lighting, and then the following year we should be able to get new carpet under as well. So those all reflect positively. Another thing the board should be aware of is the city did hire a new CFO, Baja Gerlach. I reached out to her to set up a meeting with the finance committee as requested previously, so we could discuss the approximately $1.67 million that are remaining from the special library levy as of the end of last fiscal year. Casey and I did have a productive pre-meeting with her on February 12th, and then we're trying to set up a meeting between her and the finance committee sometime in mid-March. March 10th or 13th. 13th is what we're looking at right now, tentatively, but I don't have that finalized yet.
Jeff, how do you pronounce her name?
Baja? Yeah. Speaking of projects, we're making a significant progress on the main library renovation phase 2 project. So the handrails at the front entrance are installed. Those will get painted when the weather allows. The exterior book drop has been reinstalled as well. The new street monument sign is in place. It'll need to get painted and then the actual letters attached, again, when the weather allows. The special collections workroom is ready for the staff to use. Most of the electrical work in the public area has been completed. We were able to clean the carpets, and we did have to hire some movers to move some of the really heavy furniture coming from downstairs up. So we were able to do that last week. The public service desk has been installed in the new special collections area, and the day use lockers were delivered actually this morning. The storefront walls, that's kind of the big final piece. We can't really do much until those are in place. Those should be installed in late March, early April. So we're kind of in a little bit of a holding pattern right now as we wait for those to get delivered and then installed. And then a couple of other improvements on the exterior. We're working with Davenport West students to create a bike rack, and a newer, nicer bike rack that's going to be installed. And we also worked with Downtown Davenport Partnership, and DDP is going to bring us into their existing program they have for public art. This is actually the public art sculpture program that Quad City Arts offers. If we were to do that on our own, the cost would be closer to $2,000 a year to participate, but DDP is offering it to us with no cost to the library. So what that means is we'll be able to have an exterior art sculpture piece next to the main entrance. That's what that, if you're curious, that's what that 4x4 foot square piece of concrete is. It's not just a place to sit. It's really meant to be for art. So we're excited about that, especially that it'll be no cost. And if we do find a piece of art that we really fall in love with and we'd like to have as a permanent kind of installation, there's an option to do that working with the artist. We have to raise the funds, probably working with the friends if they'd be interested in doing that, and then to purchase the piece. Otherwise, we should be able to get a new piece every year, which would be good for conversation and help contribute to art.
Another cool thing about that is with Quad City Arts, they did that whole internet search where they put up clues and then people go from place to place. And we did that with our grandchildren. And it's so cool because then we see places like the public library.
Exactly.
It's really neat.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Jill,
Yeah.
that's exactly what we're hoping to be able to participate in the program. I sent an email to you about this to save the date. The library's annual staff development day, that's our in-service, will be on Thursday, April 10th. We are this year going to coordinate with our colleagues at Bettendorf Public Library, so we're going to be doing joint in-service. You are all invited to attend part or all of that day, depending on your schedule allows. We'll ask when we get a little bit closer for some numbers if you are interested, so that we can make sure that we accommodate that, especially in terms of lunch. It will be at Bettendorf Public Library from 8:30 to 4 o'clock. We're going to have Ladrina Wilson from Lyman Consulting as the keynote speaker. We'll also have additional training sessions in the morning with Dementia Friendly Iowa. And then in the afternoon, we're going to have some breakout educational sessions and some cross-library department meetings. So this will be a good opportunity for trustees, if you're interested, to converse with some other trustees from another library and have some conversations with them.
And Jeff, if I might add, I think Stephen, I've attended the last few, and it's really fun to be a part of the professional day.
Yep, highly recommend.
Yes.
Jeff, just a question. Evening news, the Rock Island Library is clearly part of the dementia friendly deal. Are we already part of that?
Not yet. This
Yeah.
training will help us accomplish that. That'll get us another step closer to having that certification. In terms of strategic planning, we had nearly 2,000 people that participated in the community survey, which is a really, really great response. We had over 100 people that responded to the partner survey, so thank you for all the trustees that were able to complete that survey. We were able to get some good information from them, and our strategic planning consultant is going to integrate those results with some insights from the focus group, which is going to be this Saturday. 3 focus groups that are going to be this Saturday. And then they're going to put that in with some peer library comparisons and some benchmarks, and we'll have an insights report that they'll be able to share with the strategic planning team prior to their meetings on March 3rd and 4th. So that'll be coming up soon as well. We'll share that information once we have it with the board. But really, really good, really good engagement, and hopefully some really good feedback that we'll have in there as well. We created a disaster plan for the first time, so thank you to Catherine Whalen and the Special Collections team, and for Lexi and the leadership team for working on coming up with that. That's going to help us in the event of a disaster. So that could range from a burst water pipe in our, say, basement Special Collections to something more significant where we might have a tornado that takes out a building or something like that. And so it's meant as a guide to help us when we respond to a situation like that, just another step to be prepared. And one of the biggest advantages to that is also having some disaster response kits that are going to be developed and assembled to have in each of our facilities that is kind of ready response. So we can grab that kit and then do some quick triage as needed. We're excited about that. Thanks to Jason's work on the AV equipment at Fairmount, I mentioned that earlier. Those were upgraded, which you are going to actually get to experience next week or next month, rather, when our next trustee meeting is going to be at Fairmount. So that's a reminder for that as well. For library materials, services, and programs, community outreach is now leading over a dozen monthly story times at Davenport daycares and preschools. The newest stop added was a Head Start program at Family Enrichment Center in Goose Creek Heights. Our Adopt a Reading Pet program had over 177 people in attendance. It was a really cute and fun program with a lot of new pet owners, which was really cool. And of course, the annual formal wear giveaway is always very popular. Got good press coverage as well this year. A lot of library stories in there. I encourage you to read through those when you have a chance. And in terms of upcoming programs and events, Hillary already mentioned the save the date for the Friends big fundraising event that's going to occur on Saturday, September 27th from 6 to 9. We also have the Seed Library kicking off on March 1st. Our library business assistance program is doing a writing your business plan on Thursday, March 6th at Fairmount at noon. And a couple of other programs that are listed there. The only other thing to mention that's not in the report is the email I did send to you a couple of days ago regarding legislation. House File 274, that is the law dealing with obscenity and removing the protections for public libraries and educational institutions from those laws. And also there's a corresponding legislation that deals with making it a civil action process so people can start suing libraries as well. That did pass at a subcommittee, and they have a hearing today at 1 p.m. As part of the, I believe, Education Committee that's going to be discussing that. So there's an update on that, I guess, for what it's worth.
I have a question. This is to others. Steve mentioned this is all contacting our legislators. I've been hearing from some folks that sending emails or letters is less effective than phoning. Yet when we try to phone, oftentimes we don't get through. And I'm just curious as to yours or anyone else's feeling about whether the written word works or whether we just have to keep trying to phone.
Well, before I went to lobby day, I sent emails to my senator and representative, told him about it, that I was going to be there and hoped to be able to talk to him. And then I got responses from both of them. I got one directly from Senator Gruenhagen saying he'd do his best to be there, and got one from Dan Gose's clerk saying that he put it on his calendar.
So they did respond,
Yeah.
not just a word.
My experience has been that the state folks are pretty good about responding to their email. Federal folks, not so much.
It is a challenging system, the way it's set up with the subcommittees, and then usually it's a very limited window to provide public comment, and oftentimes, as these bills make their way through, there is no way to make public comment except during that subcommittee initially. And if, for the current political climate, if with one party having a supermajority, they can essentially move whatever legislation they'd like to move forward. With that said, it's important we do continue to share concerns when we need to and share our voice.
Just before I came here, I saw Sam Helmick, who's the next ALA president, post saying that within 1 hour's time, there were 1,500 responses that came up for the meeting. So it was something, something positive. Within an hour's time, it just felt good. The attendance and the responses were good.
And there's close to 3,000 emails that have been sent
to them
for this particular piece of legislation.
Okay.
Again,
Any other questions for Jeff?
I was just going to say, maybe an important thing to think about is just put as much as what you're trying to say in the subject line, because that would show up, at least they can see.
Right. Right, and then again, when we want to reply to that, and it becomes, you hit a reply, then it becomes RE and colon. I add something in front of it, so it again stands on top and doesn't go within.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. So we can move on to the next item on the agenda. Council liaison, Miriam.
Yes, thank you so much. Today, I couldn't get out of my driveway. I was going to be there face to face today, but had a garbage truck stuck in my tilted alley. In any case, it is pretty quiet still at council. It is, we're doing sort of routine things right now. We've gotten through our committee meetings, and then moving forward, and Jeff talked about the timeline, and there's steps that staff has to hit all through that, and then it's up to the council to make sure we vote, at the proper time on this. So one thing, our new finance director, Basha, has been in the finance department for, I don't know if she's been there a couple of years. So she was a member of our finance, so she is not unfamiliar with the city, but she hasn't been there for years and years and years. So and then the other change that will be coming in the summer is Fire Chief Carsons has announced his retirement after 32 years. So they will, certainly that search will start, but that was just announced last week. Really not a lot else from me right now, unless you have any questions of me, but it's annual renewals, seems that we have had some very big things in front of us, and this seems to be a period, knock on wood, that is quieter and more routine. So, in any case, that if anybody has any questions, but that's all I have today.
Is there any questions for Marion? Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, next item on the agenda is old business. And we have a motion to approve a general wage increase of 2% for the library director, effective retroactively to the first pay period of January 2025, in line with adjustments made for other city department heads. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second? There's a motion and a second. I did want to say that partially this is delayed because of me, because I was having issues with my cell phone. And so communications between myself and the HR director were very convoluted. And so Jeff got the information for this. So we are in sync with what the city is doing. So is there any discussion from anyone else? Okay. So there's a motion and a second. So we'll have the roll. Amanda?
Absolutely.
Honey?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Malvika?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And myself is yes. So that passes. Okay? Thank you, Jeff. And new business. We have a motion to approve a 3-year collective bargaining agreement between the city of Davenport and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, 887, for the term July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2028. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Sorry.
Okay.
Michael.
So there is a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just a couple of things, Tom. There's a memo included in your packet that provides a little bit of background information. We were able to meet with, between the city of Davenport and AFSCME Library on December 18th and 19th. We had productive discussions at that point, and we reached a tentative agreement through mediation on January 27th. The changes are outlined in the packet. There is the actual agreement that's included in there, and a couple of highlights just to bring out are essentially updating the language to reflect changes to the admin policy, which the board had recently agreed to change. There was an opportunity for employees now to select meal periods, durations, it's either 30-minute or 60-minute lunch. Previously, they could only do that one time for the entire year. Now they're going to be able to do that at least twice a year as needed. There's a limit of the maximum accrual of comp time from 240 hours down to 80 hours. That's really to be in line with other across the board with the city. That doesn't impact operations here at the library. We don't really issue comp time, so it doesn't apply much to us. Updating language related to the maternity and paternity leave that reflects federal and state law. Also eliminating the requirement that employees that opt to take any kind of bereavement leave have to take that leave consecutively. As I don't know if you recall, but that was something the board approved in an admin policy change. So now an employee has 6 months to take that as needed for them. We're trying to be more mindful and considerate of what that process is like for an employee and not forcing them to all take it immediately, but they can take it for whatever works in their situation. Being just a little bit more compassionate. The two things that will impact the budget financially are increasing the contribution rate to the retirement health savings plan that RHSP goes from 1% to 2.25%, and then the negotiated wage increases. So on July 1st of each of the next successive years will be a 3% increase to salary, then a 2.75% and a 2.75%. So the next steps at this point, the union did notify the city on February 5th that their membership ratified the agreement, so they're okay with it. And the city council committee as a whole is going to review it tomorrow night, and they're committee of the whole meeting, and then a final vote occurring the following week on the 26th. Again, this is a 3-year agreement as well. In terms of budgetary impact, it's those items that are listed that are already in that, basically counts for the 1.9% that we're going to be seeing increase next year.
Jeff, one question. The point about where people could accrue so much time, paid time off, and now they can only accrue a lesser amount. Is that something that the city has been doing across the board?
Correct, and that's just for comp time. That's not the vacation time that they accrue.
Oh, okay.
And no, it doesn't really impact any employees here at the library.
Okay, that was good.
Almost none of us have any comp time to, as any.
So anytime a staff member works over the amount of time, they can choose to get comp time or be paid out in overtime. Our staff, if that happens, chooses overtime. So
Okay.
that's why it doesn't impact us.
It's
Okay,
very
all right.
infrequent.
Yeah, that, I'm just always concerned about that because there's two sides of that. One is if somebody accumulates just boatloads of time, which they're entitled to.
Right.
But then when they leave, it's a huge budgetary impact. Whereas, it's also a employee benefit on the other side. So you have to weigh those two sides. And I'm glad that we're not in a situation where it really is it doesn't really affect people. I mean, people are used to the system we have. So good. Okay.
Well, one other note too. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, before your final note, unlike Tom and Joe, and maybe you too, Jeff, I'm not a finance guy. So when I read this on Friday, when it was set out, I thought, okay, this all looks good. And then I saw that we had the 1.9% the city's going to give us. And then I saw, well, we're going to, beginning July 1st, have a 3% wage increase. Well, that's a 1.1% difference between those. I'm thinking, all right, are there some areas of our operation that are going to be underfunded in order to make the wage increase? Because we're only getting 1.9% increase overall.
Yeah, that's a good question. It does not impact our budget.
Because the 1.9 is for everything, not just personnel, right? So.
1.9 is for everything.
But 1.9% of
Wages.
6 million
Right.
is
Yes.
higher than 3%
Than
of the coverage of
3% of
personnel.
personnel.
Right. All things being equal, we must have less than 3% costs for other areas then in order to allow a 3% wage increase. Well, we're only getting a 1.9% increase in the city. I'm not being
No.
sure. No?
It's 1.9% of 6 million.
Right.
Is that the number? You said
Correct.
3 million.
Right.
Yeah.
6 million. So that's gonna break out different than the 3% of the salaries. So it's apples and oranges almost.
Okay.
Because you've got this big amount here and this, it looks like a big percentage here, but when you start averaging it out, it's not. Let the accountant tell
It is confusing, and part of it is that in the library, just like any other city service, salaries are a huge part of our budget. I mean, on a percentage basis, it's a huge part of our budget. But the city has always been able to maneuver to get the wage increase to fit inside the amount of increase that we're getting from taxes. You're right. I think eventually it might have some effect, but I don't think it's happening right now.
And I would guess that historically, your percentage for personnel has always been greater than your overall percentage increase, or at least I know that's true in educational systems. And so you have to break it down, like Joe said, so you know it fits within.
Right. But we're committed for the next 3 years. And by the way, I'm not objecting to the amounts at all.
But I think
I
that's
think
what
it's
you're
fine.
saying, right?
But I'm trying to understand how it can work, because I would assume the city, Marion, isn't going to give us big increases over the next 3 years. probably more in keeping with what we're getting this year, perhaps. And it just seems like, as you said, um, um, salaries are a significant part of our overall budget. And if what we're getting from the city remains like this, and our costs because of wages is this, at some point, aren't we going to run into an issue where there won't be enough funding? Unless we start cutting something like, okay, we won't get new computers this year because we got to pay for staff.
Part of it is funds too, where the money comes from. And the fund application. Because the city has a variety of different funds, and Mary could probably speak better to this, but like the trusted agency fund is dedicated for benefits, for example. And so that doesn't impact the library's proportion of the general fund.
So there are different ways.
Correct. Yeah. And the city has 117 different fund accounts that they manage.
Yeah, that's correct. And the other thing, keep in mind that, and I don't know if this is true, and Jeff can speak to this, I can't, but with any large budget, I used to have to do budgets for a television station, so I've done a lot of budgeting in my life. So, in any case, everything that is funded at a certain point every year isn't done in the next year. There's also changes like, there are things that departments pay for their piece of IT or whatever. Now, I'm not sure if that's true at the library, but those things change and shift. And they do, the staff has worked really hard to, our financial staff to present a balanced budget. So, it is not, given the current, and I don't mean to be a downer, given the current environment of continued cutting of property tax, of how they have cut even what the state taxes all of us on that are retired, which is nothing of our retirement income or our IRA or anything else. I don't know if you're aware of that, but I think some probably are. It may have an impact sometime, and that's a big concern. But so far, we aren't there. So if the city can continue to grow, and of course growth is capped, what we can do with property taxes now, in some cases, has some caps. But if we can continue to you know develop in areas particularly that the state hasn't decided, um, we want to flatten that out, then that's going to continue to help us. So that's an important part of growing the future. It is certainly not business as usual, and you guys know that most of all because of how they restructured how the taking away the levy for the library, which was certainly not something that anybody in Davenport. I mean, I certainly was not something I was wanting to see, but right now it's okay. We'll keep our. We need to pay all need to play. We need to all pay close attention to this, so for sure. So
Thank you, Marion.
The other thing to add for that too is that included in the negotiations were other representatives from the city, including city finance, and they agreed to this percentage. Likewise with some of the other bargaining units as well. Ask Me Library, Teamsters is currently in negotiations. I believe that's still ongoing, and then Transit was approved as well. So they feel confident with the dollar amounts that the city's budget is okay moving forward in that respect. Because you're right, it's also cumulative, right? You add 3% this year, and then 2.75% added on top of the 3%, so it does increase. And with all that said, though, the cost of inflation and everything else, as everyone's well aware, this amount helps. It is meager for a lot of people.
there's one other thing I would add in the way the city budgets, and I'm sure it's so swaying the library too. And this was something when I had to do budgets when I was working in commercial business. So if the city budgets for 100% of staff, 100% of the year. So, but within a year, you're going to have staff turnover and change, and you have people at different steps, and so often they're within that amount, and that's okay to do. But if you budget at full staff, there's usually a pad in there because people who are coming in often are not at the same level as people who are going out. And so, particularly in a situation, and I don't, I never worked in this, but in a situation where there's steps, so that's another place where there's a little flex. So I think that certainly helps, overall in the budgeting. So, I don't know, Jeff, if you would agree with that or not, but that's, been my experience, and they talked about that at budget. Sorry.
Yeah, 100%. And the city does budget conservatively in that respect. And a real world example that's playing out for the library right now is Valerie Farrar, our information services supervisor, who retired recently after 37 years of service. She was obviously compensated at a higher level, and when we advertised that position, it was at the bottom of that level. So it's much lower in terms of step increases than the others. So there's that salary savings that comes into play as well.
Any other discussion?
Sorry, one more thing. The final thing to say on this is that because this will impact the administrative policies, which you just went through a long process to approve, that means that sometime before July 1st, probably in the May and June cycle, we will have an update for another batch of some admin policies. Fortunately, it's not going to be anywhere near as many, and it'll only be reflective of the agreements most likely. But there will be that process coming forward again. So, yay policy.
But basically just cleaning this up.
Correct. It will be incorporating those into our administrative policy.
Any other discussion?
Vote.
Yes, we'll have a vote. Malvika,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
Honey,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Shelley,
Yes.
myself is a yes, so that passes. Okay? And so now we're on to review of the confidentiality and privacy policy. Jeff?
Thanks, Tom. So included in your packet is a memo as well as a copy of the current policy and the proposed changes to the new policy. This is just part of our regular 3-year cycle to review this policy. We've had a confidentiality and privacy policy since 2005, and it primarily governs how we maintain our library records and transactions to make sure that we're in compliance with Iowa Code Section 22.7. It does also include the general principles of librarianship, including the Code of Ethics that the American Library Association has issued. Other changes to the policy, we cleaned up some redundant language. We defined personally identifiable information for the first time. It no longer specifically calls attention to a national security letter or a FISA order, because warrants and law enforcement actions are already covered and addressed. That was a big deal in libraries after 9/11. We feel like we're kind of at a point now where everything is kind of codified. It also does one big change to this. It does clarify that transaction records can be shared with parents and guardians for minor children, not only items that are overdue. So this would be a change in the current policy. The rationale for that is that parents and guardians are the legal responsible for any charges for their minor child. The library doesn't act in loco parentis like the public schools do. So, in theory, they should be able to see what their children have checked out. We believe that this will alleviate some friction points with staff and parents that might be denied access, because currently, unless an item is overdue, unless we're going to send them to collections, we won't necessarily inform the parent or guardian about that information. So right now that we can't share that information at all. And this policy change would allow us to share that information with the parent or guardian. So that's a decision for the board to decide whether or not you would like to make that change or if you want to keep it status quo.
My first question,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when looking at that, in the current climate, I think one of the big pros to that is an argument against censorship and book banning is that parents are the people who make decisions about their children. And if they don't have access to see what their children are reading, they can't make those decisions. So in some ways, I think it's an excellent argument for saying, if this exists, then book banning and censorship doesn't necessarily need to exist because parents do have that access. If they don't have access, then you have a whole different argument. So that was just something.
The document that was included with the memo, is that the current policy or is that the?
That's the proposed
revised?
change. Yeah, that has the new format and the new design.
Because if I look at number 4, title information will be provided to a minor child's parent only after an item has been reviewed. That to me contradicts what we just said. Or am I reading that wrong?
But the parent could request it as well, right? Or am I, so it would need to be added there?
I see. The version you're looking at in the packet doesn't have that change. That's why.
So wait, which version is which?
It would not be that final sentence in number 4.
Okay.
Can you give me an example of how this has created some friction?
Well, we'll have upset parents when we don't tell them what their child has borrowed. They're my child. You can't tell me what they can and cannot.
I want to know what they're reading.
I don't know what they're reading. Get upset with library staff for us. And it's a balancing act because we want to support all First Amendment rights.
Right.
Are there some other examples you can think of, Lexi?
Primarily before something comes overdue, like a parent wanting to know so that they can gather everything up before they come to the library. So there's something still on their account that they forgot to return. That's the only other thing you think of.
Right.
Have you seen any instances where this has created a situation that might become uncomfortable for the child?
Yes. If that's what nodding, yes. Thoughts about that?
And I would go beyond uncomfortable to dangerous.
And that's that balance.
Did you just say that? I missed. Did you just say?
So have you seen instances where that might be dangerous for a child? You might be
Right.
reading something that they find important, but they're.
Yes, so you could have that kind of a situation as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of the argument in the past for
Right.
the way it is.
Right.
I see your point, Shelley, and I
Right,
see
yeah.
the parent's point as
Right.
well.
The other piece I was thinking about, and again, this may not exist then in the future, but that librarians and folks in the library have access to the library social worker if they have concerns about that too. So it's like one more piece of the puzzle we have right now that might help in a situation like that, but we don't know how much we have. That becomes problematic since librarians are not mandatory reporters. We don't have that. I don't really know that that was even my point. I mean, I just have to process it out loud, I get it, because it's a difficult situation.
Any other discussion? We're just at the discussion stage now. So we'll be voting on a policy next month.
I guess I'd kind of like to know in library staff discussions, like how people were feeling about it, what, in general thoughts were, any feedback you guys can give us about if there were people strongly one way or the other.
I think it would depend on who you asked and who you had to interact which upset parents.
I see, I mean, just a thought, again, we're just talking,
Yeah.
like, we have those cards that we issue, we'll be issuing them in September, spring, for the elementary, I forget the exact name, we have those cards.
The read cards.
Yeah, and the elementary school students, that's what they'll get, right?
Yeah, those are the cards that are
Automatically
given,
given.
where it limits them to a 4-item
Oh,
checkout.
yeah, right. And I was thinking, these things might come up during then because they're elementary school kids. Again, to what you said, both ways to what both of you said. But I would like to know what she or he they have taken from the library. Those because there are more than 900 cards or something that will go out to schools.
Yes.
Right? This knowledge is because of on-site board agreement. So I think that's something to think on.
Anything else? Okay, well, that'll come back to us next month for a vote by the board. Next item on the agenda is the discussion of the Davenport Community Survey.
Thanks, Tom. So as you know, biennially, the city of Davenport will do a survey of the community to in part assist council with kind of assigning the priorities that they want to do for budgeting purposes. And they're asking kind of the community's satisfaction level for quality of life and also quality of city services. And historically, the library does very well. We're typically rated towards the top since they've been doing this in 2006. This year we were rated number 2 at 93%, just behind fire and paramedic at 95%. The next closest then was garbage and recycling at 87%, and then it drops pretty precipitously after that as well. In terms of the library in particular, all areas of the library that were assessed received ratings above 75%. And that indicates that there's very high resident satisfaction with library services, so we're very pleased with that. The library services that residents indicated should receive the most emphasis over the next 2 years are availability and quality of materials, and also the quality of children and youth programs. So that's what respondents have indicated is their priority in terms of the library. According to that important satisfaction analysis, there were no high priority library services for the city of Davenport. So what that means is that the city is currently providing the services that residents are expecting to receive in that area. So they should maintain emphasis on those items. So in other words, status quo, the library is doing good, keep up the good work. A couple of other things, 58% of Davenport residents have used a Davenport library facility within the past 12 months, and that's a very good number to have. Also related, most people say they feel safe in their neighborhoods and in city facilities, but only 47% of respondents say they feel safe in downtown Davenport. That number has declined significantly since 2008. I believe it used to be above 60% or so. So that number is definitely decreasing. That's something we see play out, and we hear in comment cards periodically. Likewise, the satisfaction for city services overall since 2008 has declined for the most part, but the one exception, and there might be one other that has increased a bit too, but that is the library. We've increased from 90% up to 93%. So even though it's a very small percent increase, I think that is really shows a testament to the great work that our staff does in supporting. The other thing to note is that residents are 93% satisfied compared to the national average for U.S. libraries is 64%.
Really?
So Davenport is doing very well and has done very well for a number of years. So our staff is really incredible.
That kind of surprises me because to me, it would be, libraries would be, people would be satisfied across the board, more or less, but maybe particular locations are either they're not providing enough hours or different things are affecting that satisfaction. So it is a kudos to our staff, but, you know, that surprised me, that 64%.
I did share the survey with our strategic planning consultant too, and they gave us some kudos too. They were really surprised with the results.
So that's not bad.
So it
They shouldn't have been there.
well, so it will be injected into the strategic plan.
Yeah, into their insights report that they provide to the strategic planning team.
Good. Any other discussion or commentary on that? Okay. So we will move on to the next item on the business, president's comments. The only comment I really have is that Bob Davis, who was appointed as board member, has never shown up. And according to our policy, it's like, was it 6 months?
The bylaws, I believe, are 6 consecutive absences.
And so, I mean, he's had, I think this is what, his third?
I think this might be 4.
Okay. So we have to be prepared for, that he may need a replacement. Apparently, he's been reached out to and no response. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, we may have to talk to the mayor and need a replacement.
6 is pretty generous.
6
I got a lot of
consecutive.
vacations to plan apparently.
It's 6 consecutive.
That's
Consecutive.
that's still pretty generous.
So,
That has happened once before.
Yes, I was gonna say that has happened once before.
so I just wanted to alert everybody to that we may have that. And the next item on the agenda, turn it over to Mr. Orr.
Thank you very much. So, thanks everybody for having me. This is great. A little bit about me. I've worked in IT since 1999, actually. So this will be my 26th year doing IT. I've been with the library for 10 of those years. I actually kind of escaped the IT world for a short term in the late 2010s and worked in banking as an analyst. So I did a lot of spreadsheets, and my education is actually in math and astronomy, not IT. But this is kind of where I fell in. I started out at the time where the biggest thing we had to deal with was telling people not to worry about Y2K. So that to give you a sense of how long I've been doing this. And so what we do is it's hard to quantify what IT does in this day and age, because I like to tell people I can't think of an interaction that anyone has with the library that doesn't involve us in some way. We're not there, but we are, because you can't check out a book without interacting with technology. Maybe you yourself don't, but the customer service attendant helping you does. And if you do it yourself, you're interacting with our technology. It's pretty much an endless amount that we service in these buildings. If it has power to it, we probably touch it. So, I mean, I try to start high level here. You know, the main thing we do is we keep computers and servers and all of our mobile devices, phones, our regular phones, all up to date and secure. I mean, that doesn't sound like much, but when you consider what that entails, even when I say keeping PCs, we don't just have the Windows computers you see on the floor. We have Linux machines behind the scenes. We have Macintoshes behind the scenes for staff to use for video editing. You know, Adobe Creative Cloud Services, all the things that staff and patrons need to access. We maintain the network and devices. So the network is kind of fascinating, I feel like, to outsiders. If you think about your network at home, and everyone has one at home now, you probably have a firewall that you plug in, and then you plug everything else into that or connect to that Wi-Fi. That's it. You might run antivirus on your computer. Hopefully you do. Maybe you don't. But we have to take that quite a bit further, obviously, in the library. And one of the fascinating things about the library is when I started, I was in what's called an MSP, so it's a managed solutions provider, which is where I think a lot of IT people start. What that is you're contracted out to multiple different businesses. So I worked with pharmacies, I worked with accountants, I worked with architects, and everybody kind of has their own niche needs. If you're working with an architect, they're using CAD. They're not using QuickBooks. But if you're working with accountants, they're using QuickBooks. If you're working with medical, you're working with medical software. But I can tell you, I don't think I've ever worked in an environment as complex as a library, which I was not expecting. When you consider all the little things that a library requires to function, like sorters that we maintain and fix. When a sorter goes down, we fix that like mechanics. Even just checking out a book, you have barcode scanners, you have RFID antennas, you have security gates that contain everything. So you kind of combine everything you might do in retail, but then you have to combine that with an openness that makes everything approachable for the public. You think about this meeting room, we have to make sure it meets the needs of us as staff, the board, and anyone who comes in off the street who might want to use it. And that's a really interesting balance that we have to maintain. So anyway, back to the network. So yeah, then we basically filter everything that comes in and out of our network. The Sonic Wall is a device that is much like your device at home that watches all the internet traffic, but just kind of on steroids. It can alert us to things. It kind of tracks everything that comes in and out. We also utilize a service called firewalls.com that has a staff member who also helps monitor that, just because it's a lot. There's only 2 of us on staff. They monitor it 24/7 for us. So if something comes in or if our network goes down, sometimes I get a text message in the morning that something's happening at the library. And it's really fascinating that they are an MSP, like I was saying before. They kind of contract for us and help manage that for us. We filter all email that comes in and out. So like when your email at home, you probably have a spam filter, but that's where that ends. Our spam filtering goes quite a bit further. If anything is suspicious, it gets what's called quarantined. So staff will get an email that says, hey, you do have an email message that's quarantined. Here's what's in the header or in the subject line, but then that's it. And that will require IT to intervene and look at it and say, is this really dangerous, or was it fine? Was it a false positive? And in the past, we used a service called Barracuda to do that. We have since moved that to Microsoft. Microsoft does almost all of our cloud services at this point. Back in 2021, Microsoft started a pilot program, which I don't know how long, I'm sure some of you know, Microsoft has a long history of supporting libraries, which is fantastic. We could not do what we do without their support. We just couldn't afford it, honestly. They have always kind of donated Windows licenses for either free or very low cost. Starting in 2021, they started to donate cloud services. So we don't pay Microsoft for some of those services. Like previously Barracuda, we paid several $1,000s every year to Barracuda just for email, just to maintain and monitor our email services. Now we pay Microsoft nothing, but we get even better service. It's pretty phenomenal what they're able to do for us. We use antivirus software, obviously, but we have an interesting, unique antivirus setup here because we don't just have devices used by staff. We have devices used by the public, so the needs are very different. So we have software that we run on all of our public computers called Deep Freeze. And that Deep Freeze software is on this computer as well, because this one could potentially be used by the public. What that does is when the computer reboots, it will go back to a baseline. So anything you do on this computer right now, once it restarts, is gone. It will just go back to how it was this morning. And then once a week, they go through a process called thawing. That computer will reboot, not frozen. We do that on Sundays while we're closed. The computer will update, install the Windows updates and things, because even that won't stick. And it'll complete that process, reboot frozen again. And then when patrons come in on Monday morning, everything's ready to go, and it will wipe anything that they might do. I mean, it's a fairly expensive product, but it is worth every penny because we just couldn't support the public the way we do without it. People make mistakes on computers, but that that software can fix a mistake. No matter what you accidentally download or what URL you accidentally go to, it's gone. It's pretty phenomenal. And of course, we maintain permissions across the library. So we run actually 3 separate networks at the library. We have the staff network, which we use, for our own staff devices and for library purposes like the catalog and, all of our normal library services. And then we have a public network that anyone can use. And the public network, actually, the library-owned computers are on that public network. And so are devices that you might bring in. So your own personal device, when you connect to the public Wi-Fi, that's the public network. Then we have a third network called BYOD, which is where we let staff, and you guys could too, honestly, connect their personal devices to the BYOD network. And all that is it doesn't require log in every single time they come to work to accept that EULA when we join the public network. Does that make sense?
Is that the Wi-Fi, Jason?
Yes.
Is that what it means?
Yes and no.
Oh,
The interesting thing is the way most people are going to interact with that is through the Wi-Fi, but that runs through the wires as well.
Oh.
So the public is segregated to its own separate wires as well.
So if I connect something.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So like any of the public computers on the floor that patrons might come in and use, those are connected differently than a staff computer. It actually uses a process called VLANs, which are virtual local area networks. Not to get too into the weeds with that. So you can have one switch, like you might at home, where you're plugging in your cables, but on this switch, you say this port only talks to these ports, not these. So like you don't have to have multiple devices, but you have separate networks. It's a pretty interesting setup, and we have to do that because we're open to the public. But yes, Wi-Fi as well. We use network monitoring that alerts us to issues, hopefully before staff does. I'll get into it a little bit more later, but we use a product called Zabbix that monitors our entire network and sends us email alerts or can do push notifications on our phone if it sees anything irregular on our network. Talked about staff and public computers, so we do a lot of server services because, again, we interact both with staff and the public. So we have 6 servers, 4 here at Maine, 1 at each branch. The branch servers primarily are for staff. They handle things like when you log into your computer, it confirms your identity and handles that kind of thing. DNS, it handles web addressing. Sorry, I know it's all kind of too in the weeds. But here at Maine, we have several servers that have to do that for staff, but then we also run the library website that the public access. All the blogs are all run on servers out of this building. What else did I have? So we run remote desktop servers, file servers, print servers, all those things for the public and for the staff. The Davenport Votes website, that runs out of this building. And then of course I talked quite a bit about it already, but we help staff and we maintain all of our cloud services, which are primarily Microsoft based now. We moved from on-premises SharePoint to Microsoft's cloud SharePoint. We moved our email from local here into Microsoft's cloud. All that's possible just because of that generous donation from Microsoft to do that. Otherwise, that would cost tens of thousands of dollars every year just for that one piece. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's a minimum of over $100 per user per year. Like when businesses who use Office 365 and Microsoft 365 Microsoft's doing fine. We maintain all the meeting room equipment, so everything you see in here. We just finished the main project out at Fairmount, where we upgraded all the meeting room equipment out there. The nice thing out there is we were able to add teleconferencing capabilities to every room. So as of now, or before that upgrade, each building had one room that had these kind of capabilities to do teleconferencing. Because we did these rooms 10 years ago, there was less need. And then COVID happened, and now everyone is asking for teleconferencing capabilities when they use a room. So when we did this upgrade at Fairmount, we were able to add that capability to every room.
How many rooms is that?
There's 3 rooms.
3 rooms, okay.
Yeah, the story room, which is kind of staff only, and then two public access rooms.
Did you do all of that change over yourselves, you and your staff member? Did you have outside
No,
help?
no, that was out of one of the CIP projects. It was about a $60,000 completed project. We contracted out with CTI. That's actually a pretty common misconception with IT, is meeting rooms are like this interesting convergence of IT and audio video services. And they are very different specialities. So when it starts to come to some of those things like cameras and microphones, you really need someone who knows how to make that work right in the size of space you have. So that's why we contract out, for sure.
It's like you don't want the orthopedic guy doing your heart surgery.
Yes, almost. That's a really good analogy. And some of the other things that we, might take care of that you wouldn't see in a normal setting, or you might also, like, we have the sorters, that sometimes they mechanically go down. I've done a lot more of that kind of thing than I really ever thought I would or had expertise in before I started here. So like electrical cabinets and the sorters are a complicated electrical beast with motors and things you don't normally see in IT. But we make it work. We take care of all the security cameras, obviously network storage. Network storage is huge in the library. Our backups. We take a process of, and we've complicated our own process of backups as we used to host everything on site. Now so much lives in the cloud. Just that's the way the world has gone, is everything is cloud hosted now. But we make sure that everything is in the cloud is also backed up on site. So we have a copy of every file that staff or patrons might use in every building. That was something I changed when I came on as IT supervisor. We used to store copies at Main and Fairmount. Now we store copies at Main, Fairmount, and Eastern. So it would have to be a heck of a disaster for us to lose everything. And that includes everything that's stored in Microsoft's cloud as well. So all staff's email and files, SharePoint, OneDrive, all those things are stored locally. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge list here. I don't need to go through it all. So obviously a big part of our job too is helping staff negotiate the constantly evolving technologies. The big project for us this year is moving staff and patrons from Windows 10 to Windows 11. I think staff are fairly prepared. We've had good feedback that I think most people have used it outside the library probably by this point. We're behind. Normally we would have upgraded by now, but our equipment was just too dated to move on to Windows 11 at the time. Thankfully, we've been able to add to the IT budget, and in the last few years, we're ready to go. We're ready to push Windows 11 to everybody. But we're constantly walking that tightrope of we need to move staff along, but we also want them to be comfortable. Like I think last year we kind of pushed a little too hard. Last year we moved everyone's email to the cloud, and we also moved from Skype for Business for staff to Teams for internal communications. Yeah, some staff really struggled. So this year, I think we're taking our foot off the pedal a little bit.
And in some cases, it's not necessarily something that IT, our local IT department and Jason have control over. Like the Skype for Business is going to be sunset, and that's forced on him. So he had to, come up with solutions. Here's what we're going to do. There's the research on it. And a lot of hard work on the back end to then be able to have the product and launch it for staff and train them and help support them with it. And that's something that IT does admirably.
That was one we had to move very quickly on because Microsoft recently changed their policies. Microsoft used to release a product for business. So if you had a product, you had Skype, obviously, but then Skype for Business was a very different product and was intended for businesses. And in the past, Microsoft has always supported those products for 10 years. I think they got tired of that. They got tired of people not buying a new product but once a decade. So they decided the version of Skype for Business we were using, they were only going to support for 5 years. And we got very little business. We thought we were going to have 5 more years of life out of it, and it didn't work out. So we had to move very quickly on that changeover. And that pushed staff pretty hard. we do our best to minimize our downtime. You hear ISPs and other websites try to talk about that 99.99% uptime. We shoot for that too. We try to make sure the library website is up 99.99% of the time. All of our library services like staff email and the public internet, everything we provide, we shoot for that exact same thing. And actually, we generally make it, which is, I think, commendable for a 2-person staff. We do all of our documentation, so we keep careful records of all of our infrastructure. So if anything were to happen to one of us, or even just when we decide to move on, the next person can come in, look at our documentation and see, what just happened at Fairmount, who did the work, who do I contact if I need help. We do a lot of documentation that way. We do a lot of documentation for staff. We try to give staff multiple different avenues of training, and all of our staff are different. So sometimes we'll do in-person trainings. Often we will do documentation training. So a document that staff can read, that's something I think our staff we did a survey recently asking people what they prefer. And that big surprise, librarians.
It's a library.
Yes, prefer written documentation with screenshots. Because the other thing about that too is an in-person training is really hard to go back to. Where a written document with screenshots, you can always refer back to it over and over. And obviously, we maintain a lot of relationships with outside vendors. We have to do that in order to get good service and provide good pricing and make value of the budget that we have. We use a vendor called TechSoup, which some of you are probably familiar with a lot. Another vendor that we couldn't do what we do without. They negotiate between third parties like Microsoft and us to help provide services to libraries. They do the vetting to make sure, I'm not just a guy trying to buy Windows for cheap. No, I'm really a library, and we go through TechSoup to do that. And then I just have some quick numbers here. We have over 270 computers. I mentioned before we have six physical hardware servers. But on those servers, we run 45 virtual machines. So that's been a big change in IT over the time that I've worked in IT. It used to be when you worked somewhere or you set up a server for a business, you set up one Windows server, it did file services and print services and all those things in one server. Now you have one physical server, but that physical server will run about a dozen instances of Windows. And each individual instance is one thing. So one instance of Windows will run your file services. One instance will run your print services. And that really helps you print downtime. So if you do have a downtime that is an issue related to email, you only need to reboot the email server. So you're not taking everything down. It used to be you had to take everything down and that server would take 20 to 30 minutes just to come back up because it's doing so much. Now it's literally seconds. It's kind of an amazing. It makes our lives a lot easier. We have 37 core network devices. And when I say a core network device, that means we have core switches, one at each floor here at Main and one at each building, and those kind of route all the traffic I was talking about earlier between the public and the staff. We have about 25 Wi-Fi access points between all 3 buildings. Here at Main, we have a lot just because this building is a concrete bunker. So getting good Wi-Fi signal throughout this building requires quite a bit of coverage. A couple years ago, we went through and updated all those access points to new Wi-Fi 6 standards. So we'll get another good 5 years of life out of those. Of course, that never ends either. Now we're quickly moving on to Wi-Fi 7. And then we monitor our own network with a product we call Zabbix. That was another one we had to move on very quickly recently. We've had a lot of vendors who have been bought by larger vendors and then changed their mind. Zabbix was a result of one of those. We used to use a product called PRTG. They were bought out and the new company came in. That company would typically give a discount to libraries. The new company came in and said, we don't want to do that anymore. Oh, and we're going to raise the price for everybody, triple.
Nice.
So yeah, we usually would pay about a quarter of the regular price as a library. That was going to go back to normal, and then they also tripled their normal price. Yeah, that's been difficult. So Zabbix was a quick turnaround to a new product simply because of buyouts.
Have you been happy with it? Or?
Yeah, very happy. Yeah, actually, honestly, and that's the number you'll see here. We monitor 13,793 items. That's just our network inside the buildings. That's not even going outside the buildings. That watches all of our websites. If one of our websites has any issue, even if it needs an update, it will let us know. Our old software can do that.
Yeah.
So it's one of those silver linings.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't always change unless you're pushed into it, but sometimes when you're pushed into it, it's positive. Yeah, and this one, the thing is, our old service, you had to pay per monitor. So we could only monitor 500 items, which is a lot, but clearly by this number wasn't enough. Now we're monitoring nearly 14,000 items, and we don't have to pay per monitor. So we're just able to watch a lot more. Like recently, I started to add our security gates. I can monitor those over the network, and if a security gate has an issue, I can find out about it before staff. Where it used to be, we didn't have enough monitors to track that. So if a security gate went down, typically it was staff who found out because it would stop counting patrons coming in and out. That's what they would notice. Now we can notice even before they do. Those kind of tools are just necessary for IT. Typically, if someone has found a problem like that, it probably hasn't been working for a day. Where a tool like this will tell you within minutes, and we can catch it before anyone even notices. And just a few numbers, we had more than 152,000 public Wi-Fi sessions last year, 42,000 public computer sessions. That's been a fascinating number. Over the years, you know, computer sessions were shooting up greatly for a very long time. I feel like since COVID, they have started to go back down, where then public Wi-Fi usage has shot up. Because people have their own devices now. So they bring their own device in and use the Wi-Fi that way. But this was the first year actually we saw a decline on both, which I thought was also kind of interesting. I think the reason for that is we had a huge growth post-COVID in the number of people using our Wi-Fi. And even during COVID, starting in COVID, we turned our public Wi-Fi on outside the buildings and for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as opposed to used to only be when we were open. That saw huge growth. But extra work for us, of course, to keep track when we're not even open. Just a few things that I've kind of mentioned, but things we've done in the last few years. We have upgraded the server at Fairmount to be more in line with the rest of the servers. We use a product called VMware. VMware allows us to host all the servers in one location. So I can go into one pane, they call it a pane of glass. So it's one window I can go to and see all of our servers no matter which building they're in. It's a great piece of software. Unfortunately, they were also bought out recently and stopped doing library pricing. And their pricing is now 10 times what it was. So we'll be switching that in the next few years as well. We're looking at a couple different products. Microsoft has a product that's very similar that will probably win out because they do still give us special relationship pricing with Microsoft. But having the Fairmount server upgraded meant that we at least were able to now have everything into a single pane, and that will stay that way in the future. The first Windows 11 devices have gone out. We've been testing that for a couple of years, so we were able to push that out to staff this year. It's amazing how much goes into testing something little like that. Just because we don't always control everything that runs on our computers, we have to make sure that Windows 11 will work with Polaris, our ILS, our catalog. We can't just assume that everything will work. We have to test endlessly every device we plug in our computer, every barcode scanner, every printer. We have to test all that before we can just push it out and make sure it's going to work for everybody. We've moved huge amounts of data to Microsoft's cloud. We talked about that. We moved from SharePoint 2013 is what we were previously using. Now we're using SharePoint, what they call modern SharePoint on the cloud. We migrated from Exchange 2013 to Exchange 2019 to now Exchange in the cloud just in the last few years. That's our email service. Whenever you hear Exchange, that's Microsoft's email provider. We migrated our help desk for staff to a new Microsoft service as well. just, the reason we did that is our old one, again, kind of just decided they were done doing it completely. They had a free version, they're done with that. Now they want you to do a paid version. So we moved it to Microsoft. But the reason we did that wasn't really cost, because it wasn't that big of a cost. The reason we did that is familiarity. Our staff are using Microsoft services, so it's very easy for them to adjust. That was a change that also had to happen quickly, but staff kind of just hit the ground running with it. I feel like nobody really struggled with that one, like We've added lots of security cameras in critical areas. That's been a big push of Jeff's. We've added security cameras in staff areas so that we can watch, well, not really Jeff's, I guess. Public staff asked for it. But just also to monitor the public floors, more.
Safety.
Yeah, safety, exactly.
Safety.
We added cameras into the kids area here at Maine, which we didn't have before. I added recently a camera right outside of Casey's office on the second floor that was kind of just a blind spot. We really couldn't see what was happening. We've made a new solution for story times here at Maine. We don't have a meeting room that we can really use for story times here. They do it on the public floor. So we came up with a solution of a movable AV cart, kind of like the old school days of in high school when you wheeled a cart in, but this one has a computer and a camera and all the things you need to do a little PowerPoint for the kids and speakers and all that. That's been working great, actually. And we just finished the meeting room upgrades at Fairmount, which was about a 2-year process, but hugely beneficial, I think, to staff and public. That's a lot of information. Wow. I know I kind of spouted a lot there. So if anybody has any questions, but thank you all for supporting us. I feel like we had a couple of really rough years not that long ago where costs have ballooned and skyrocketed. And I know the board and Steve showed up and said, look, IT needs some more money, and Jeff as well. And that has really changed the way we were able to provide services to the public. We couldn't have done what we did at Fairmount this year without that support. Every other time we've had to kind of cut corners, like even when we did upgrades at Eastern, we had to cut corners and we couldn't put cameras in every room. Or this time we didn't have to cut any corners. We could do what was best for everyone. And so thank you all for supporting us and helping to make sure that happens.
It's like, thank you for keeping us on.
And like the other thing to point out, because Jason mentioned this a couple of times, but it's a staff of 2.
Yeah.
Think about everything that he just shared and the wide variety of equipment that has to be maintained, and it's only 2 people. And so we're saving the city a ton of money in that respect, and they're doing a fantastic job with it. And I have to remind myself that Jason is just human at times, because there are times that he might be traveling in Europe and it's 2 in the morning or something. He's able to fix something here remotely because he still allowed to take vacation. He can take time off, right?
Yeah.
But they do a phenomenal job.
Yeah, it's always interesting. There's kind of an adage in IT that you'll have like 2 people for every 100 staff.
Yeah.
Or there's numbers like that you'll see bandied about, but it's really hard to do that with a library because we do have less than 100 staff, but we have 100,000 people that we support. With our public, all of our public access. So it's really, that's the thing I do love about doing IT here at the library is it is something different every day. It is something new all the time.
We're glad you like that. Is there any other questions or comments?
It's kind of strange to think about it, and these are not comparable, but on one hand, all the IT stuff that's going on, and we go back to during the pandemic when the library was kind of the drive-up window at Fremont.
Yes.
I mean, there's still a lot of stuff going on, but
that was actually a great time for me behind the scenes because there were things that are really hard to do when we're open. But when we're closed and I can shut down certain things that I normally couldn't to fix, that was probably the most productive summer of my career. How much we were able to get done.
To what you said about Wi-Fi during COVID times, I do remember parents with their cars outside our library, kids doing homework.
Mm-hmm. That's why we did it.
Yeah, what you did. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And so I think we're about done. So I will remind everybody that next month, our meeting is at Fairmount. And so just remind everybody not to come down here. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
So say.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Should we take a photo next time, Tom, when we go down to Fairmont? Because we used to have a photo of all of us on the website.
Oh,
If it is springtime.
well.
Oh, no, then, yeah.